Welcome to the Childhood Apraxia of Speech CAS information video. If you are watching this video, you are likely to either have a child with CAS or be working with a child with CAS. This video is not a formal training session, but an informal information sharing session about CAS and a therapy approach that can be used for those with CAS. CAS is a rare speech sound disorder that affects 1 in 2 children in every 1,000. CAS is a speech sound disorder in which a child has difficulty making and coordinating the precise movements needed to say words, although there's no damage to muscles or nerves. A person with CAS has difficulty creating, remembering and retrieving a motor plan or blueprint for speech. A blueprint for speech is a bit like a set of instructions that the brain sends to the body to make the sound or word. Children need to create motor plans or blueprints in the brain to be able to say certain sounds and words. These plans are normally created automatically when children are learning to speak, but for children with CAS, this is not the case. Children with CAS have difficulty creating these plans or blueprints, and then also have difficulty remembering and retrieving them in order to say words accurately. A speech and language therapist would look for 3 key characteristics in order to make a diagnosis of CAS. Firstly, the child would make inconsistent errors with their consonants and vowels when saying a word more than once. For example, if a child was asked to say the word baby 3 times, they might say boo, then e, then bay. Or if a child was asked to say helicopter, first they might say helicopter, then heticopter, then helicopter, so each production would be different. Secondly, the child would have problems transitioning between sounds and syllables when speaking, so their speech might sound slow or distorted or staccato, choppy. They might also leave gaps between syllables. Thirdly, their speech would have an unusual prosody. For example, they might have equal or unusual stress patterns, as well as unusual intonation, rate, and rhythm of speech. Some additional features might also be seen, but these are not essential for a diagnosis of CAS to be given. A child might have difficulty saying sounds in isolation, both vowels and consonants. They might have difficulty saying longer or more complex words. Their intelligibility might be poor, they're difficult to understand. Progress in therapy might be slow, and they might have difficulty moving their tongue or lips. This is known as oromotor difficulties. CAS can range in severity from mild to severe, and the characteristics of CAS will change over time. Generally, children with CAS will require regular, direct therapy with a speech therapist alongside daily practice between sessions at home and/or at school. There are different therapy approaches that can be used. There are 2 for more severe cases or younger children, the Childhood Apraxia program and Dynamic Temporal and Tactile Cueing, DTTC. There are 2 for less severe cases or older children. One is REST, Rapid Syllable Transition Treatment, and the other IPA, Integrated Phonological Awareness. This session will give an overview of the Childhood Apraxia program. It is not formal training, but will give you an introduction to the approach. The therapist working with your child might recommend a combination of approaches. Therapy will focus on speech discrimination, listening to different sounds, as well as production, making sounds. Daily practice would be ideal, with school liaising with parents or carers to give regular updates and to share resources. Here is the speech sound ladder from the Childhood Apraxia program. It works from the bottom up. Starting at the bottom, you can see speech motor skills, which is an optional layer. This involves practicing movements linked to speech sounds. For example, the lip shape for or oo or e. The next level is single sounds. You would work on listening to the difference between these and also producing them. Then we have consonant-vowel, vowel-consonant words, such as boo, key, day, ice, or ape. Here we're thinking about the sounds in the word, not the way the words are spelt. So for ape, this has a vowel sound and then a consonant sound. even though the spelling has another vowel at the end, ape. The next level up is consonant vowel words like daddy, mummy, or seesaw. Again, we're thinking about the sounds, not the spelling, or for seesaw. Then we have consonant words, for example, cat or dog. Then multisyllabic words like caterpillar. Then consonant cluster words like star or cloud, where you've got two consonants at the beginning of the word. Then we'd work on generalising the use of learnt sounds in phrases, sentences, and then connected speech. Therapy will work at different levels of the speech ladder, often simultaneously. So we might be working on k at single sound level, but also working on b at consonant vowel or vowel consonant level. We'll go into each of these levels in a bit more detail now. Let's think a bit more about working on single sounds. Firstly, we would introduce pictures that represent different sounds. Those included in this slide are pictures from the Childhood Apraxia programme, but other pictures could also be used. For example, Jolly Phonics or Little Wonder pictures, perhaps the phonics programme being used at school. After the child understands what the picture represents, you can carry out a listening activity. The picture of the geese here represents g, the picture of the snake represents s, and the picture of the drum represents d. So I might say, point to or draw a dot on the sound that you hear. G, and then I might say d, and then s, and then d, and get them to point to or draw a dot on the sound that they hear. Children with CAS sometimes have difficulties with their listening or discrimination skills, which are not linked to hearing difficulties. We will need to work on listening before we work on production. Once we have done some work on listening, we will move on to single sound production. We'll show the child the picture and see if they can make an attempt at the sound. When the child makes an attempt, we need to give specific feedback about what they've said. This feedback will help them to make changes to their production for the next attempt. For example, if a child sees the picture of the snake and says shh rather than s, we could say, good try, that was a nice long sound. Now can we say it again, but this time with a big smile? This feedback includes information about the length of the sound and the lip shape needed. Feedback might also include using gestures, for example cued articulation, visuals, for example articulograms, or through verbal prompts, which might involve talking about the voice, place, or manner of the sound. You can find out more about voice, place, and manner from the introductory session on speech. Once the child is able to produce the sounds in isolation, the child practices sequencing sounds. This is easiest when saying the same sound a number of times, as there is no movement, for example, s, s, s. But as we introduce different sounds, it becomes more difficult. If the sounds are very different, for example, s and d, children generally find this easier. However, when the sounds are very similar, for example, s and z, where you just add voicing, children can find it more difficult to retrieve and use the correct motor plans. To support the child with sequencing, we can practice saying the sounds really slowly and or in unison at the same time as the child, until the child is able to speed up and say the sounds by themselves. If the child struggles to say the sound in isolation, it can help if we make the mouth shape with them. Then just demonstrate placement rather than moving on to produce the sound. So if we're working on we might just go with our lips and actually not produce a sound, but just give them a little prompt to know how to make that sound. The next level up the speech ladder is consonant vowel or vowel consonant words. For example, words like core, key, arc, ape, or ice. Firstly, we'd work on hearing the difference between the words before working on production. You could do this with picture cards. First, we'd introduce the pictures, explaining what they mean, and then we'd do a listening task. For example, here we have a picture of a saw. We use this to cut wood. Next to that, we have a picture of sea. We might swim in the sea. I'm going to say one of these words, and I'd like you to point to the one that you hear. Sea, saw. saw, saw, see. It's important to make speech therapy fun. On its own, this task is not very engaging, but you can be creative and vary the therapy. For example, you could put each word in a hoop, and then the child has to jump on the word they hear. Or you could stick the pictures to the wall, and your child has to run and tap the one that they hear. We'd then move on to work on the production of consonant-vowel and vowel-consonant words using picture cards or objects. For example, saw, see, so. We would provide feedback on a pupil's production so that an accurate production could be achieved. We can use sheets like these from the Childhood Apraxia programme to work on a range of CV and VC words and non-words. Here you practice moving from a consonant to a vowel or a vowel to a consonant. In these examples, you have a sound in the middle and then various vowel sounds around the outside. You would need to teach the child which sound is represented by each picture before using this sheet. I might have a turn first and then ask the student to have a turn. For example, starting from the inside on the right-hand picture, s, ah, si, s, sa, sa, s, so, si, su. And on the left picture, starting from the outside, is, aus, ois, is, ace, s, os, s, os. This activity allows for repetitive motor practice, which is going to be helpful for children with CAS. The next level up the ladder is longer CV words. We could combine two CV words we have already worked on to form a compound word, for example, seesaw, or we could use a combination of sounds that the pupil can already say to form other CV words, for example, buddy, daddy, or mummy. At this stage, we might also want to practice syllable clapping. At the bottom of this slide, there is an example from the Childhood Apraxia programme. You can practice blending the two CV words first before then introducing the picture of the compound word to show the meaning of what they have just said. Continuing our way up the ladder, the next level is CVC words. These are generally more difficult than CVC words for a child with CAS to say, and are usually worked on after CV words. We can start by building CVC words from a consonant-vowel word plus a consonant. For example, C plus T, as in this picture below. Picture cards can again be useful at this stage. We'd want to work on both nouns and verbs. After CVC words, we would move on to multisyllabic words and consonant clusters. For example, caterpillar, sky, or cloud. When working on these, we'd consider the sounds a child already has in their inventory. For multisyllabic words, we'd support the child to say the words with a natural stress pattern, and would vary intonation on these words. The next step up the speech ladder is phrases and sentences. Initially, we would work on combining words to form phrases and short sentences. For example, more seesaw, baby dummy. Gradually, the complexity of the sentences will increase. We will start with sounds that the pupil is already able to say. At this stage, we're keen that all the syllables are marked in a word and the sounds are said accurately. We are also keen to have appropriate stress patterns, intonation, rhythm, and rate of speech. It is helpful to vary the intonation throughout therapy so that the child is learning that a particular word can be said in different ways. This slide shows a few examples of short phrases. The final stage is connected speech. Generalization of new sounds into connected speech can take time. At this stage, we would want to be building a child's awareness of their speech and ability to correct errors when these are made. This is known as self-monitoring. We would also want to be building awareness of a child's speed of speech and perhaps support them with pacing their speech. We'd continue to work on intonation and stress patterns if needed. Examples of activities that could be carried out for generalization include Focused 5-minute conversations, where a pupil really thinks about their speech. The length of time of a focused conversation could gradually be increased. Another activity could be talking about pictures in a book for a set period of time, playing 20 questions, or creating silly sentences using best speech. You could also play a memory game or ask your child to read to you while focusing on their best speech. During these tasks, the adult should give the child specific feedback about their speech. For example, "Well done, you said X correctly." Or if you hear an error, "I heard Y. Could you try that one again?" Or "I heard Z. Is that what you meant?" Giving specific feedback during these structured tasks is really important. At other times, you are likely to just model correct pronunciations rather than point out errors, unless instructed otherwise by your child's speech and language therapist. That brings us to the end of the Nuffield Speech Ladder and the end of our training video. Thank you for watching the training about CAS. If you have any questions that have not been answered by watching this video, please contact the Link therapist for your school and they will be able to help.